I'm thrilled that you're here today, and I'm really excited to talk about Chinatown and Gayborhood, two neighborhoods that I really love in Philadelphia and I've loved since I was a young person. And you know, I'm a gay guy. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but I'm a gay guy who does not have any style. And it's a very rare thing, but you know, when I look this nice, it's because my dear friend Rhonda Goldfein helped me choose this outfit. And you know, it helps me to be excited up here and really be able to talk about the Gayborhood. I should at least be showing some gay style. And this talk is about, you know, having the passion and the style to really fight for a neighborhood. And I was so inspired by the fighting advocates of Chinatown who over many years fought to make sure that that neighborhood would survive. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story, but it got me passionate about the Gayborhood, and imagining that each and every one of us in this audience could be passionate about our neighborhoods and invest energy into making our neighborhoods exactly what we intend them to be. Because the story of cities is the beautiful flexibility of these neighborhoods, their evolution over generations, and the fact that new people are constantly coming in and putting their particular intention, their particular creativity into making cities like Philadelphia vibrant. So, you know, how did I get passionate about the Gayborhood? Well, I wasn't, as I said, always a stylish person. So here's me, my high school ID, and my mother's in the balcony. I want to thank my mom because she believed in... You know, my mom believed in self-expression, and she let me go out into the world looking like this. She never stopped me and said, the glasses aren't so great, the haircut's horrible. She let me go out. And it was the story of my mom and my family that I was allowed to go out and that I could get on the bus. I lived in Cheltenham, take the 70 bus to the Broad Street subway, and I would ride down into the city on the Broad Street subway, actually right past this building underground, and get off at Walnut Locust Station. And as a young person, to go into the Gayborhood, to get off at Spruce Street, to see gay men and lesbians, bisexual, transgender people, and to see the incredible vibrancy of that neighborhood. And I participated in it in my teenage years and into my young adult years, and I felt safe there as a young gay man. It was a place where I could experience a number of different stories of what it meant to be gay, and I could begin to get involved in my community. I could become an activist. And so some of the ways that I did that, you know, I went to this little restaurant called Duck Soup. It says Philadelphia's first gay restaurant. I don't think that's probably true, but it was a good marketing pitch. A little cafe on 12th Street, Kurt's. We would go dancing at Kurt's. It was a horrible fire trap on Chestnut Street, but wonderful music and lights. Woody's, of course, the bottom, and 12th Street Gym, where we would go to work out. And so this feeling of community that made me feel like I was part of something that made a difference, and learning from all those folks in my community. So this is Giovanni's room, our great bookstore. It was my first community center, and a place where I could go and get books and learn ideas and be taken under the wing of the incredible owners of that bookstore who would share information, point us to the right organizations. So even before I found William Way and eventually became director there, this bookstore was an incredible landmark. So, you know, 20 years later, I become director of William Way Center. I have this passion about the Gayborhood, and I meet with John Chen, who's the executive director of the Greater Chinatown Development Corporation. He's the gentleman on this slide. And John was talking to me about Chinatown and how he had a map of Chinatown in his office, and that was the district that he cared about and stood for. And he told me the history of Chinatown, and that in the 60s and 70s, as the Vine Street Expressway was built, and in the 80s, the convention center was built, Chinese people took a stand to say that they would not let their neighborhood be destroyed by the building of the Vine Street Expressway or the building of the convention center. And so advocates like John Chen, Helen Yee, many others got together to make sure that when the Vine Street Expressway was built and when the convention center was built, any affordable housing that was destroyed, any shops that were destroyed, would be rebuilt on 9th Street. And in fact, that rebuilding happened, and Chinatown was saved because those advocates went to City Hall and made a case for why this cultural district mattered. It didn't happen just because people sat around and hoped it would happen. It happened because activists took a stand for that neighborhood and actually had a map in their mind, the power of maps, to imagine the neighborhood that you call yours. So as I go through this talk, imagining what neighborhood would you call yours, you know, if you were to choose the neighborhood that you were to be passionate about. So this is William Way. This is a styling gay man from the 1980s. I love that little pose. It's a very 80s pose. So William Way is the guy who the William Way Community Center is named after. He also worked for the city housing office, and he's a little thread to Chinatown. This is not a story about a white gay man coming in to save Chinatown. Chinese people were the folks who made what happened in Chinatown happen. But William Way was the director of the housing office who worked with these Chinese leaders to make sure that the housing would be rebuilt on 9th Street. So there's this interesting little connection between this gay leader and the many Chinese leaders who were fighting for the protection of Chinatown. And I only raise it because I think that William Way, who loved the gay neighborhood so much and understood cultural districts, immediately got why it was important to protect this cultural district. And, and as a result of all the work that the Chinese activists did, Chinatown is a real neighborhood now. When you go into it, you're excited about being exposed to Chinese culture. This picture is Chinatown in Washington, D.C., which is merely a metro station. There's no Chinatown left. So just take that in for a second. The fact that the Chinese activists went to bat is why we still have a Chinatown and why there's all that vibrancy in the neighborhood. And I felt like, well, that's what I want to do for the Gayborhood, and that's what I want you all to do for your neighborhoods, to have the same intention, to have a vision for them, and to fight for them. And with the fluidity of cities being what they are, you may or may not win the battle. Your neighborhood may or may not go the way it wants to go. But this is about citizens taking ownership. So I studied a little theory behind urban planning, and I want to thank Melissa Kim from Asian Arts Initiative, who really pushed me in the right direction. And Asian Arts Initiative is doing this incredible work I'll talk about, but this theorist Kevin Lynch talks about the things that make up working neighborhoods, and I'll go through them in a second, but I also wanted to mention the cultural districts tend to be close to center city. They're diverse neighborhoods, and in this generation, we're much more comfortable with diversity. We're much less likely to want to live in a neighborhood just with people like us, but the cultural district should have multiple diversities in them. That's what makes them exciting. And perhaps the most important thing is that there's affordable housing. That's really challenging. It's one of the big things Chinatown fought for successfully. Can you imagine affordable housing so that there can be a diversity of people who live in your neighborhoods? And then how do you mark them out? Kevin Lynch talks about edges. So in the Gayborhood, we have these signs with the rainbows under the street signs. And we also have signs that acknowledge particular gay historical figures, Barbara Giddings. Chinatown, too, has these signs that map out the sides and edges of Chinatown with Chinese street signs. And so the edge is really important. And I want to point out the concept of Erev, which is used by Jews to mark out the internal experience of Jewish community. The Erev is actually a border of that community. And so this idea of borders, that when you walk into a neighborhood, you say, wow, this is something. I've hit a neighborhood that really means something to me. And I think this is what makes cities exciting. Not when we see a Walmart in every corner, when we see a CVS on every corner, but when we walk into a neighborhood and see this is really exciting. It represents a particular culture. I want a city of Philadelphia like that. I don't want to tell you what all those districts look like, but I want the Gayborhood to be one of them, and I want Chinatown to be one. So the maps are really important. Chinatown taught us that zoning and fighting for the naming of your neighborhood, Chinatown, and Chinatown North, which is sometimes also called Callow Hill North. But they really fought for the naming of this district and to allow growth areas for Chinatown to jump over the Vine Street Expressway, so to make sure that there's space for the growth of a new generation of Chinatown businesses. And this is Washington West, which you could call the Gayborhood. I have to admit, the term Gayborhood was coined in 1995 by the editor of the city paper. I hated it. I fought the term Gayborhood for generations, and I lost that fight. And this is one of the ways I can show it, that on Google searches, Gayborhood Philadelphia, till 2009, it doesn't really show up as a term that's used regularly. But after 2009, it becomes the regular term established for this neighborhood. So what would you call the neighborhood? Maybe Gayborhood, maybe something else? Some people have viewed them as diversity neighborhoods, diversity zones, where not only LGBT people would live, but other types of diversity and celebration of that diversity within the zones. Mapping out Gayborhood, and actually, this is a map for tourists so that people know that they're coming into the neighborhood. In case you didn't know, Gayborhood. Anchors are really important. So this is Holy Redeemer Church, one of the oldest Chinese churches in America, and it's a key landmark on Vine Street. And I thought, well, what is our key landmark in the Gayborhood? It would have to be Woody's. Similar spiritual experience. And to acknowledge, you know, bars are real spiritual places for those of you who have danced in them. So that there can be all kinds of anchors that reflect the diversity of the community. The Chinatown Arch, another key landmark. One of the things I looked at was the importance of intergenerational expression so that youth, adults, and elders could live in these neighborhoods, that they weren't just for young people, they weren't just for old people. So in the Gayborhood, we've built the John C. Anderson Apartments on 13th Street. If you haven't seen them, please come visit. 56 units of housing, and I want to say like John Chen's a visionary in Chinatown, Helen Yee's a visionary in Chinatown, Mark Siegel was the gay visionary who said, we need to make sure there's senior housing for the LGBT people who created gay liberation. They build our institutions, they build our community, and we should have housing for them. Because if you can't afford to live in the neighborhood, you know, that's a real loss. So here is senior housing for LGBT people and allies. It's not just LGBT, again, that multiplicity of diversity. And this is the On Luck Apartments in Chinatown. Similarly, Chinatown's commitment to seniors being able to live in Chinatown, not having to travel from Upper Darby or Delaware County, but they can actually live within Chinatown and be around other Chinese speakers. The William Way Community Center. The community center where I work, one of the central anchors in the LGBT community. And it took something to make this community center happen. A lot of investment over a lot of years till we finally own this building. What does it mean to own a building? You know, for a community to have that stakeholder, it makes a huge difference. Asian Arts Initiative, a similar model in Chinatown, a key stakeholder building that says this is our community and this is a place where Chinese people can come and be safe. So, you know, I'm really thrilled that I met these Chinese leaders because I think one of the great things about Philadelphia is that serendipity of just meeting these people who help you see, Chinatown's a lesson for the Gayborhood, and we can take the lessons that they've learned and hard fought to win and bring them into our community to create something exciting. This is the vision for the new community center for Chinatown, which is going to be at 10th and Vine. An incredible building. It's going to include a school, again, housing. We keep coming back to housing, how important that is, affordable housing, so that people like me can afford to live in the neighborhood and not have to travel miles. Because, again, if we work in the neighborhood, if we shop in the neighborhood, if we participate in community groups in the neighborhood, we should be able to live there. So this project, look how beautiful it is. And again, jumping Vine Street so that the new generation of Chinese leaders are staking a claim for that territory north of Vine Street and saying, that's where we're going. Like they have a vision for where they're going. Public events. This is Outfest at 13th and Locust. Many gay public events where the community gets to come and celebrate and be in the neighborhood and say, this is our territory. Not our territory alone, and I think that's what's different from 50 years ago. This generation is very excited to say, this is our territory, please come into it. Please join us in our celebration. And so that LGBT allies are welcome to come to Outfest and feel like they have some ownership in it. And so I view cultural districts as being much less restrictive than they were perhaps 50 years ago. And when you look at innovative cultural districts, you heard about Nerd Street, North 3rd Street, the great work that Indy Hall's doing. Shout out to them, yeah, Indy Hall. You know, there's an intentional community. Or later on today, you'll hear about the Naval Yard and the great work Terry Gillen's doing. So these intentional neighborhoods, it's important for everyone to feel like they're welcome. It's not just for geeks. It's not just for tech folk. It's everyone can come in and participate in building the community. And I think that sort of diversity strengthens the cultural unique expression of either a Chinatown or a Gayborhood. Likewise, the Chinese New Year, again, a huge celebration within Chinatown where Chinese people get to celebrate their culture, but allies get to come in also and experience and participate in it. I want to leave you sort of with my final example, which is intentionality moving forward, where you actually imagine something new for the future. And this is the Pearl Street project. Pearl runs just north of Vine Street. It's an alley that runs between Broad and 8th Street. It's a really cool little alley, and it has multiple uses. There are homeless services on it. There are different businesses on it. There's housing now, as new folks have begun to build condominiums in that neighborhood. And Asian Arts Initiative has this new project to imagine Pearl Street as an engaging community thoroughfare that has all different little items. So benches, and one of the things I loved about the project was benches that you can sit on in the day, but they actually fold up at night to deal with that issue of people sleeping on the benches, which is always an issue for the neighbors. But new folding benches that lock up at night. I want a place to sit downtown. I love watching people. I wish there were more benches. So just the fact that there's this technological solution. And when I talked to Melissa Kim about this project, and she actually took me on a tour of Pearl Street, I thought, I want to do the same thing in the Gayborhood. Here I am stealing from Chinatown yet again. And this is Irving Street. It connects 13th and Juniper Street. William Way is on the left. You see the blue dumpster? That's the back of William Way. And the John C. Anderson Seniors, if you were looking down this alley, you would be standing right in front of the John C. Anderson apartments. So I imagine almost a yellow brick road. I know it's corny, but a connection between John C. Anderson and the William Way. Green garden here, a playground. Again, there's a lot of heterosexual couples with families, gay families moving in. So welcoming the entire community into a celebration of LGBT culture and not having it be this isolated culture, but imagining the Gayborhood as all welcoming to everyone. So this is one of the things that I want to focus on, is taking Irving Street and repurposing it as a new piece of the Gayborhood that would allow us to celebrate community and culture. So I give you all these examples as a way of saying that it's so important for us to fight for our neighborhoods, and we all can be those visionary fighters who make a difference. When I talked to John Chen, when I talked to Helen Yi, I got the sense that if you only organize people and you find allies, and you don't just organize within your LGBT or Chinese community, but you find allies from the entire neighborhood and get them engaged in envisioning what a powerful cultural district could look like, businesses, housing, community organizations, that it reinvigorates our city. And as we look at the future of our city, what that looks like, whether it's just the Gayborhood, Chinatown, or many other districts to come, that's the 21st century that I want to see for Philadelphia. So that when a young gay person gets on the Broad Street subway nowadays and comes down, he or she feels welcome into the Gayborhood in the same way that I did, and feels like they can participate and get involved in the community. And when a young Chinese immigrant comes into Chinatown, likewise, they feel able to get plugged in and involved, while at the same time, the breadth of the community can go into that community, celebrate the incredible diversity and richness of Philadelphia. Thank you very much.